Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We talk every Big Ten team while challenging the national SEC bias along the way. I'm JR, joined with Zack Guggenheim, and today we are finally talking about the punishments for Michigan that have come down on Friday for the sign stealing scandal, what happened back in 2023, and Tony Petitti has a new idea for the playoffs that everyone hates. So we're going to talk about it, what's going on there. But I do think there's a little bit of stuff in both of these stories that people are not fully recognizing. I do want to make sure I bring those up and make sure that we do not miss those things. So if you're listening on podcast, please do give us a 5-star review. Helps us out a lot. You can listen to us, of course, the Big Ten Huddle every Monday through Friday on the podcast platform. You'll occasionally get weekend shows during the season. You'll get a power ranking show on Sunday morning as well. And you can follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, TikTok, all those different places, and buy some Big Ten Huddle merch down below. You'll find it there. And now here's the guy who literally texted me this weekend just to remind me how much the NCAA stinks. Zack Guggenheim.
I think that's the shirt that everybody should buy on our shop right now. The NCAA stinks because, once again, they've proven our point. They stink.
It time and time again. I mean, I don't know if the shirt will ever go out of style, really.
The only way it's going to go out of style is if they actually do close shop, which that might come sooner rather than later. They're at least irrelevant at this point.
Yeah, pretty irrelevant at this point. So let's see who we got here. Max is here, says, which is more ineffective, the NCAA or healing crystals for cancer patients? Neither are a good idea, I think. Stay away from both. Don't trust either of them. I think there are better options out there. Max always coming in with the good either or. Briggs says the SEC. I asked who was worse in the original title, Tony Petitti or the NCAA. He says the SEC. I can't argue with that one, Briggs. So
it's fair. It's fair.
Excellent point. Philip says ILL, INI. There we go. And of course, Philip excited about his Bears. Caleb Williams looking pretty good in the preseason game there. And let's see. Philip says 32-team playoff, true 1 versus 16 football matchup. At what point would G5 schools get auto bids? Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that is an aspect of all of this that could be talked about. I honestly don't have all that many thoughts on it. Like I do think the G5 schools need to be included, but overall, like I'm looking at this more with like the Big Ten, Power 4 aspect and stuff like that. Do you have any thoughts on the G5 stuff before we get into it, Zack?
No, I haven't thought that far ahead, quite honestly.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into the Michigan stuff. All right, so Zack, oh boy. So Michigan got hit with their penalty for sign stealing and everything else. It's honestly, Michigan fans are taking a victory lap because they didn't get any wins vacated or anything like that, and Ohio State fans are a little upset. It's a very interesting situation, so I'll run through the penalties real fast, and then I'll turn it over to you, Zack. 4 years probation for the program, a $50,000 fine, 10% of the football budget, which could come out to over $30 million when you also add in that they won't get their postseason revenue for this season and next season. I think the aspect of this that a lot of people are missing is that this is withholding money. This is not necessarily a fine that you are set to pay by like a certain due date or whatever, right? You get the electric bill for your house, you got to pay it by this due date. This is more the NCAA saying you will not make this money and you're going to have to try and operate without it. Jim Harbaugh gets a 10-year show cause penalty. Sherrone Moore gets a 2-year show cause, a 3-game suspension, 2 games this year, the 2 games that they got to choose. I guess the NCAA can't even choose what games you're suspended for now. And then Sherrone Moore doesn't get to go to Germany next year and play Western Michigan. I think that that honestly might be the worst part of this entire thing is Sherrone Moore doesn't get to go to Germany. So
yeah.
Connor Stalions with an 8-year show cause. Oh, I should say Sherrone Moore's 2-year show cause is not going to prevent him from coaching at all. There's two different kinds of show causes. There's show causes that essentially ban you from being in the NCAA. There's other show causes that it's just like an annoyance that you are employed because you have to continually show cause of why you hired that person. But to my knowledge, that doesn't even impact Michigan because Michigan already had it as their head coach. So it really doesn't do anything to them. 8-year show cause that does keep Connor Stalions pretty much out of college football altogether. Denard Robinson gets a 3-year show cause, and then there are some stuff of Jesse Minter and Steve Clinkscale, but those were for the recruiting violations with their penalties and stuff like that. So Zach, I will turn it over to you now. Did the NCAA get the punishment right?
JR, do you have a spare hammer? Because I can't find mine.
I have a toy hammer in this room somewhere where my kids play at. That seems efficient.
Yeah, so much for the hammer that certain outlets were projecting. So this is more significant than people think, and I think we'll get into that. Here's my first reaction. Why is it 8 years for Connor Stalion and not 80? Like, what are we doing? Get him out of here. Like, firing him into the sun. This is absurd. Okay. That's my most irrational. No, it's not irrational take. My most emotional take. I do think there is some weight with the fines and the probation because on one hand, it's essentially limiting Michigan from further wrongdoing. And I think it is marking Michigan with a bit of a scarlet letter. It is saying you did cheat. And it was against the integrity of the rule of the rules, which, a number of people have been saying this. I think Stuart Mandel, who we've criticized on this show, I thought made a really good point that right now, if you're a Michigan man, that stands for cheater. And
I mean, yes, but Stuart Mandel has said so much crap over the years that, like, I'm sorry, it doesn't even mean anything coming from him because he's going to take shots at anybody. And, like, this is the problem with a lot of journalists nowadays is that they will go so far out to say, something sensational about even the smallest things that even in the really big things, even if it is true, even in the really big things, it's like, okay, but you were also trying to make this sensational thing out of, something that was really a non-story just 3 months ago,
Sure.
So like that's the hard part is like, 10, 15 years ago, yeah, it would have mattered when a respected journalist came out and said something like that. But
Yep.
I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but for me, Stuart Mandel's not a respected journalist, so he can say a Michigan man doesn't mean anything all he wants, but he says other crap that doesn't mean anything too.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. The point isn't Stuart Mandel, though. The point is that narrative. And I do think that narrative will stick a bit, particularly because, for a couple reasons. One, because they got these penalties and because you have these show causes. This was not well, I guess they didn't do anything, so we'll slap them on the wrist. It feels like that, and we'll get to that. But they did brand Michigan as being guilty. And I think that matters in the narrative. And what do we talk about all the time? That college football is about stories. It's about narratives. And so the narrative now, whether people like it or not, is that Michigan cheated. They were immoral. They were not integrous. And that is something they're going to have to work through. Now, do I think that the title is tainted? I know we'll talk about this more. Do I think the title's tainted? No. But do I think that Jim Harbaugh is a great coach? I think he is a good coach. But do I think that he is the man that he said he was? No. He said that a Michigan man doesn't lie. He's a liar. He's a liar.
Yeah, and I think that is probably the most egregious part of a lot of this stuff. If this was just the sign stealing, and I know Michigan fans say this all the time, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with them when they say, like, oh, the sign stealing is such a nothing thing. And it's like, okay, that's why this is such a big deal about why Jim Harbaugh would lie and do all these things, and Connor Stalions would take it to the extent that it is, because in reality, it's really not that big of a deal. It's really not that big of a deal that Connor Stalions stole signs. Did it give them a competitive advantage? Yes. Did it give them the competitive advantage to the point where they were solely able to win games off of that? No. Connor Stalions was stealing signs from Michigan State in that Central Michigan game for him, and Central Michigan didn't win that game. You want to know why? Because Michigan State had better players, and Michigan State was a better team, right? It can give you a competitive advantage, but the biggest part about all of this is that Connor Stalions and Jim Harbaugh, and probably others in that program, but we don't know that for sure. We just have the stuff here where it's like Connor Stalions, named him the KGB, and he's got, he's throwing stuff in ponds and all this stuff, which, by the way, like, that's just completely ridiculous. If we want to get into the comedy of the story, we could spend an hour on all of that stuff. But like, that's the most ridiculous part of a lot of this stuff, is that it got escalated by Connor Stalions and everybody else. And I said it on Twitter yesterday. If I'm a Michigan fan, the biggest thing that makes me upset about this is that Connor Stalions, yes, he cheated the rest of the Big Ten in college football, but you know who he cheated worse than anybody else? Jim Harbaugh, the players, Chris Partridge, the coach. He cheated the program and the other coaches. So for people to be out there talking about how, oh, Connor Stalions he's this great guy, it's like, have you no shame? Do you not care about your program? Do you not care about J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, anything like this? Because the only reason dudes like Stuart Mandel are out there writing this article right now is because of somebody like Connor Stalions. So, yeah, you got your national championship, and nobody's going to take that away. It didn't get vacated. Like we said on here, even if it got vacated, it really wasn't going to be taken away anyway because you experienced it, you saw it. But at the end of the day, what did get taken away is the reputation of a lot of these players, the reputation of a lot of these coaches, because A, Connor Stalions was not forthright, was not honest, and B, Jim Harbaugh let it happen.
Yep. And I think with that, because we want to talk about what's going on in the world of football, but this is a fan podcast. And so I want to speak to Michigan fans. Some of you are, you're taking victory laps and you're making fun of other fans for crying. I just want to push back on you guys. You need to understand your program needs to eat this. And you guys, in a sense, need to eat this. Because if this shoe were on the other foot, if this were Ohio State, if this was Michigan State, if this was the SEC, which, by the way, the SEC was cheating all those years, and who was angry about it the most? Jim Harbaugh in Michigan. Yep. Now it's you. And so you guys are the big bad SEC now, who's cheating to get ahead and getting away with it. And you guys were crying about it 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And not just you guys, your coach was. And so if you're sitting here thinking, oh, these dumb Ohio State fans, or these dumb Michigan State fans, or these dumb Tennessee fans, how could they be so angry? Look at their tears. They're gloriously delicious. Stupid things like that. You need to understand, you guys are you have become what you hated. And that is egregious. And you guys need to look in the mirror, because that's what this is. You guys, like, your program is now what everybody made fun of the SEC for being. And so that is my plea to Michigan fans. And I know there's a lot of reasonable Michigan fans too, that are like Rich Eisen, who I do respect Rich Eisen.
Oh yeah, he came out and said it.
And he, as a Michigan fan and as a broadcaster, was like, I want Connor Stalions as far away from my program as possible. We didn't need him. And he's right about that. They didn't need him. That team was good enough to win a national championship without it. They proved it after he got booted from the program. So, like, my plea to Michigan fans is, think about this rationally. There's a reason why people are ticked off. And it's because your program cheated, even though they didn't have to. So, like, look in the mirror and take this L.
Yeah, there's nothing softer. There is nothing weaker. There is nothing less respectable than somebody who is a complete and utter hypocrite in those who support them, if we're just being completely honest.
Yeah.
Michigan fans want to talk about how tough and how strong, and, line of scrimmage, all this, that, and the other. Like Tice here, you can call us clowns all you want, Tice, but man, you only got one name in this life, and you're going to use this name to go support somebody like Connor Stalions that cheated your coaches, cheated your players. Shameful. You are a shameful. This is a shameful act. You're not shameful per person. I don't know you personally, but this is a shameful act for you to act like this, and I have zero respect for your stance on all this. Over and over and over again, you have been in the comments. You have zero respect. I don't even want to comment on here. Just don't even pay attention to him, Zach. He's completely shameful in this aspect of his supporting of Connor Stalions and Jim Harbaugh.
Well, and the thing is, we wouldn't disagree on that. On the point that Ohio State got pushed around. Like, that's not the argument. Like, they've lost 4 straight.
We've said it multiple times. Yes.
Yeah. Like that's nobody is sitting here saying like Ohio State should get those wins back. At least we're not saying it. And so to Tyson and whoever else wants to say this is about the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry, it's not. It's exactly what you're saying. It's about reputation. It's about your name. And they tarnished it. And like I say this, I'm not speaking as an Ohio State fan as I say this. I'm speaking as someone who cares about truth, who cares about integrity, who cares about molding young men. Like, I mean, we're putting aside, I'm going a little off script here. I'm putting aside the Ohio State and football fandom. Like, we're both in ministry to see young men be molded to pursue the Lord, to pursue righteousness. And this is anything but.
And that's where we need to recognize where sports and real life are in different aspects, right? Of course it is an on the field thing, and I get that, but at the same time, if you're going to support it, I get that, but you need to take a long look in the mirror. And, if you're going to try to, come out here and say that you're a respectful person and then come out and say this stuff and, laugh at people and stuff like that, just says something about your character. But Dave brings it back to football. Let's do that. He says, my problem with it is that it was a non-blue blood. Would be the same punishment would it be the same punishment that happens to that school? Thank you for the $5, Dave. We appreciate that. No, this would not be the same punishment that would happen to a non-blue blood. If this was Minnesota, if this was Iowa, if this was, name your school Rutgers or something like that, they would bash them primarily because they do not give the TV numbers that a team like Michigan does, or a team like Ohio State does. Now, has that always been the case? No. They slammed Ohio State like crazy back in, what was it, 2010, 2011, whatever it was. Yeah. Which, I thought was ridiculous, but they went by the rules. And that's part of the problem here. They literally have rules that require certain things to be done, and they did not do those things because Michigan, number one, adds too much to the TV contract. I mean, this is just my hypothesis, but they add too much to the TV contract for the Big Ten. And then number two, they knew that Michigan would continue to come after them. So they tried to do something that Michigan would accept, which they're not accepting. They've appealed it now, and we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, which, by the way, the fact that they're appealing it, to me, is just, one, it shows that it is more severe than I think people are giving it credit for. But two, continues to show the delusion of what's going on there. Like, just, again, take the L. Come on, guys. Take the L. It's absurd. By the way, talking about non-blue blood programs getting the same punishment, Akron has a postseason bowl ban because of academics. So you can't give a postseason bowl ban because of a big cheating scandal, but you can give a postseason ban because of that poor academics. Again, the NCAA stinks.
Oh, they're just inconsistent,
Yeah.
Now, we can talk about this whole move to the fine and stuff like that, right? Because I listened to Tom Fornelli again. Dave, thank you for the $5. Really appreciate that. I
Mm-hmm.
listened to Tom Fornelli on the Cover Three podcast talk about this fine and how this is the new way of college football, and this is where they're going to hit him where it hurts. And if you haven't watched Tom Fornelli's coverage on this on Cover Three, go listen to it. I did think it was an interesting stance on the whole thing. I do think that the fine can impact certain programs, but it really depends on how Michigan wants to handle this, right?
Yep.
Does Michigan have Larry Ellison coming in and just replenishing all the money that they're not going to make from their revenue? Is this going to impact their ability to revenue share? It won't, because right now there are no rules when it comes to revenue sharing and everything else. To me, it seems like the NCAA is trying to operate in such a way where everybody is following the revenue sharing cap, but the problem is nobody's following it
Right.
because nobody's going to get punished for it. The College Sports Commission can say we're going to punish teams for doing this, but until they actually punish teams for stuff like this, it's not going to matter and nobody's going to get away from it. So I have hope that the CSC, the College Sports Commission, will actually start punishing teams for what they've done instead of just like fining them like they did here, like the NCAA did here to Michigan. But if we're being honest, you know, these NFL teams, yes, they have billion-dollar owners and everything else, but so they get fined and that impacts them. But these schools have so many donors, have so many millionaires, everything else that I don't think these fines are going to actually impact stuff. It might. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Michigan, their academic side might be so fed up with the football side, they say, get yourself out of it. And if it does, that will actually impact them. But
Mm-hmm.
if I know college football the way I think I do, which is that people value it to this crazy level, which I'm not saying is wrong, but they value it to crazy levels, then, this will be replenished and Michigan will be just fine moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think going back, and I think we both projected this rightly, right? Like we saw how big the violations were, and yet I think we both were like very much in the camp of you can't punish. Like the only time you could have really punished them was in 2023, right? And so to vacate, so for instance, vacating wins, we're both on record saying that's stupid because everybody remembers it. And a postseason ban, it like, yes, it would have been, I think it would have been warranted. But again, I see where the NCAA is coming from in the sense we don't want to punish the current team, which I agree with because over half the team was not on the national championship team. The coaches that were complicit, aside from Sherrone Moore, are not on the. They're not coaching anymore. So, in a sense, the NCAA kind of tied their hands behind their back, or they tied one hand behind their backs when doing this case because of how slow they were. Right? If this were 2023 before the playoff, and they actually did due diligence to figure all this stuff out, it was like they could have banned them from postseason play, and that would have been the right punishment. But because they didn't do that, you really can't punish them other than with a fine and have it be just.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that people look at the fine too much and be like, oh, this is a nothing punishment, and I get that. But I do think that this punishment of Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stalions are substantial enough to not make coaches want to pursue something like this, right? Yes, Michigan did not get vacated wins and they didn't get a bowl ban, which I know, a lot of Michigan State and Ohio State fans and other fans too were hoping for. But at the end of the day, what's going to deter coaches from doing stuff like this and for coaches to know exactly what's going on in their program, because whether Jim Harbaugh knew or not, he's still being held accountable for what went on here, is that coaches are not all like Jim Harbaugh, where they just wanted to get out of college and go be in the NFL. They're late enough in their career that they want to finish out in the NFL. There are plenty of coaches in college that want to stick around in college. They want to win a national championship, and they want to continue to coach in college. If that happens, if something like this happens and you get caught, you get a 10-year show cause, you're out of college football, and you're essentially never coming back after that. So the hard part here is that I get people being upset about wanting all this punishment and stuff like that from Michigan and saying, oh, Michigan didn't get anything, so it's not going to deter anything. But when you look at what Jim Harbaugh got and Connor Stalions got, those were very substantial punishments, and I do think that's going to deter at least coaches from trying to do something like this in the future.
Yeah, I still don't think they did Connor Stalions right. I think he should be banned for life, but at least he got 8 years.
Yeah, he'll probably come back. He's going to pursue it enough. Yeah. He's going to coach in high school, and somebody will bring him back. It's going to happen. But at least for now, he's banned, and that will be enough of a deterrent for most people that they won't want to have to go back to coaching high school football for 8 years. So right now on FanDuel, Michigan, their odds to win the Big Ten, it's interesting because they're kind of in a little bit of a, I would say, like, betweener stage right now. They are not high enough to be in the tier 1 with like Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon that are plus 190, plus 210, plus 420, but they're also not low enough to be down with the Nebraskas and Iowas and Indianas. That's like plus 3,000, plus 3,300, plus 4,000, right? Michigan and USC are both in this area. Michigan is plus 1,000, USC is plus 1,700. They're both in this kind of in-between area here. And I think this is going to be the most important part of this fine to see if it actually does impact things. Does Michigan still continue to elevate up and get into that first tier where they're starting getting odds like, Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon? Or are they going to fall down and start having odds similar to Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana? I think their name alone will not put them down that far, but I am interested to see how this changes with the future of the program. USC, I continue to think they're on the rise. If they don't hit it this season, I think they'll become a tier 1 program in the next coming years, but that's besides the point. That's different from this conversation.
Yeah, well, the key, how much does the fine impact recruiting? I think that's really the key. Like, does it affect their NIL stuff at all? And I don't think it will. So, I think you have to, you have questioned Sherrone Moore's coaching ability, I think more than I have, but I think we both have questions. Is he the right guy long term? It made sense short term with how everything.
And it's still early in his career, right? This is his very first coaching job. This is what you go through when your very first coaching job is at a blue blood program. You are held to a standard that is higher than what a first year coach should be held at. Because you have the responsibility of trying to compete for national championships and make the playoffs. And right now, Sherrone Moore, last year he finished the year well, but that still didn't look like a playoff team for pretty much the entire season. So so we'll see what happens to Sherrone Moore and everything else and how he navigates this. But I did want to bring that up with the future. As we look toward the future, Zach, the Big Ten playoffs, or the Big Ten is trying to possibly change the playoffs in a number of ways. So we got news from, I believe it was Pete Thamel that reported it first, that the Big Ten, Tony Petitti, are in discussions, nothing super big yet, but apparently there is a thought out there with them about a 24 or 28 team playoff and how this would accomplish a lot of the things that fans want to happen. Now, obviously, as soon as this got put out there on Twitter, social media, TikTok, wherever it might be, anywhere where the socials are active, people saw 24-28, and they had a very similar reaction to when Eli Drinkowitz said a 30-team playoff. Too many teams. We don't like this. You're ruining the game. You're ruining the regular season. I tweeted out there, I'm of the opinion the game's already been ruined. The game is unrecognizable from what it was nearly 30 years ago. But I get people still want to try to hold on to what's there. I think it's a little foolish to try and wish that we go back and try to keep what was once there. However, I get it. People don't want to let go of the past. But Zach, I'm kind of curious. What do you think of this potential college football playoff format from Tony Petitti in the Big Ten?
So I understand it, and if I'm gathering correctly, it's both about access and kind of security for all the conferences. Like that seems to be the heart behind it, right?
Yes, yeah. Big Ten, access to it and everything else. Yeah,
And it'd be I think I saw someone in the chat 7755 that would be kind of
yeah.
the
That's Philip. Yep, that's right.
yeah. And so like I understand the heart of it, and like nobody's been more vocal about playoff expansion than I have been over the past like 20 years. I mean, when I say most vocal, not that I have the biggest following, but like I am very much in favor of let's get more teams in the playoff. Let's give more access. I do think though, like I understand what Tony Petitti wants and like how this would guard against the SEC trying to assert their will and their dominance, which I think that's part of this is how can we, in a sense, guard against the SEC pulling a fast one with the at-large bids, with the 5+11 model. I get that. 24 or 28 is too many. I think, and I don't think my thought process is the game's going to be unrecognizable. I don't think that's my thought. I thought that what we did with the 12 teams we had this year was awesome. And I know the quarterfinals were blowouts, but I thought it was awesome because you did have teams that fought to get in and they were rewarded for it. And there were real stakes and there were real consequences, right? Alabama losing to Oklahoma mattered. If we have 24 or 28 teams, that loss doesn't matter, right? And I think I like the world we live in right now, where if you lose once or twice, it doesn't necessarily knock you out, but that if you lose enough, you are knocked out. And I think if you get to 24 or 28, I do start to think that you lose the appeal of what this sport is. And so maybe I am thinking about it from a nostalgic point of view, but I don't know if I understand the benefits of expanding it out that much.
Yeah, so I did want to point out the positives. I pointed out the positives on Twitter, and I didn't do a very good job of it. A lot of people thought I was like vying for this to happen. I'm not vying for this to happen. I've said this before on the show. I am a traditionalist at heart. I would love it if we stuck with like the 4-team playoffs. I'm okay with the 12-team, but really an 8-team playoff probably would have been more of my preference, right? BCS was okay, but with the SEC bias and everything else, you really couldn't have an effective BCS system. So I was glad they expanded it to 4 teams. I think 8 teams probably would have been better than 12, but I was okay with 12. There are positives to this if they did it the right way. And that's the hardest part, is that doing it the right way does not create the most revenue. Yes, I know I'm being Captain Optimistic, but this also just comes from me as like somebody who wants to listen to a podcast. I don't think I want to I don't want to listen to a podcast where people just gripe and complain about something the entire time. Like I do want actual analysis of what this would mean. And that's kind of what I want to give here. So I'm going to give you a few positives. You're going to say they are not positives and they suck, and I get that, but just hear me out. All right? This would technically keep the conference races to be more meaningful, right? You're looking at 7 teams in the Big Ten, 7 teams in the SEC. It's not going to be meaningful for Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, those top tier teams, but it would be meaningful for the Iowas. It would be meaningful for a team like Indiana, who has a much tougher schedule, or a team like USC, Nebraska, right? Washington, teams like that. It would be much more meaningful for those kind of teams, and it would be more meaningful for a team like Michigan, who has a young quarterback. Maybe they could catch their stride at the end of the season and really figure themselves out. It also does create more competitive matchups that actually means something. Right now, like, I know everybody talks about, well, out of conference games, we got to have those and they mean something. They don't mean hardly anything right now. They are so early on in the season. You lose them and people forget about them at the end of it. The last time we saw it actually mean something was when Texas beat Alabama, and people were still vying for Alabama to be over Texas. And what was that, 2023 in that very early game?
Well, it didn't matter because Bama got in.
Oh yeah, it didn't matter. Bama still got in over a 14-0 Florida State, right?
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it mattered that Alabama played that tough game, but I mean not really. If they didn't play that tough game, they still would have got in because they would have been undefeated. So I mean, I want to take a look at this from college football Reddit. They put together what a 2018 playoff would have looked like this past year. You have matchups on here that would honestly be pretty fun to watch. And I get it. I know people hate it. That's fine. But just humor me for a second. All right? We would have saw Indiana-Louisville. That'd have been a fun game to see, right? We would have saw Arizona State-Syracuse. You're telling me you don't want to see Sam Levitt, Kyle McCord, Fran Brown, Kenny Dillingham, two up-and-coming young head coaches coming up. You would have saw Colorado and SMU. Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter, Rhett Lashley, and his whole crew there. Like, there are some honestly pretty interesting matchups here that you would have been guaranteed, and it would have been fun to watch. Now, I get it. Again, it's too big, but if you just look at this, there are some actual fun aspects to it here that would actually have players participate in it and not just be a bowl game that players are not playing in because they're trying to prepare for the NFL. To me, that's the worst part of the bowl season right now, is you have matchups that would be fun if they happen in the regular season, but they're not really fun anymore because players aren't actually playing for their team, right? Mm-hmm. Players are sitting out, opting out. Now, the Michigan-Alabama game was fun because players opted out for Michigan and they still won. So that was pretty crazy and fun. But overall, like, that game did not have nearly as much excitement going into it as maybe some other ones. And then finally, honestly, kind of goes along with the competitive matchups, but it's just more games worth paying attention to. I know people say, well, more bowl games, the better. It's more games. Okay, but how many games is too many when they're not actually worth paying attention to? When they're not actually worth paying attention to, it's like, all right, that's cool, but also not really, because it's not any fun to pay attention to them because the game doesn't really matter, number one. And number two, you don't have players on the team playing that are, star players or whatever else. So I get it. Crucify me in the chat. I understand, but I did want to point out some of those possible positives there. Zach, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lieutenant Dream Crusher coming to the rescue. Thank you, Philip, for that. I do think you're right about several things here. And the biggest one I'll point out is that there is this big bowl season problem that we have to figure out. Because right now, most bowl games, your NFL draft eligible players or players that want to transfer are going to leave. And so you get shells of the team that was there into the game. And so, like, it's just a different experience now, right? Bowl games used to be a reward. It was fun. Like, I loved bowl season. But you're right, with the rare exception where Michigan can, their second string defensive line can dominate Alabama's first string offensive line. Good job, Alabama. Way to be a good SEC team.
Because Alabama didn't care to be there, right? Like, they didn't show a care and a fight to be there.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Maybe they didn't, but most of their roster was there for that game, so they at least felt obligated to be there.
Yeah, but they were there to take pictures, and they were there. I mean, yeah. Anyway, we don't need to revisit the whole thing, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, I just think that is a problem that this would address. I do think that the concerns I have, one is just I do think the regular season gets impacted. I think the other thing, I think it's either 5 or 6 games that a team would have to play back to back, like to win the national championship. I think the toll, and this is, I think, the concern with the 12 team playoff too. And you saw, like, Ryan Day talked a lot about it as he was like preparing his team for a potential 16 or 17 game season. You would have to change the regular season somehow, which maybe that's what Tony Petitti is angling at, because we know he is targeting the SEC's conference schedule and equalizing schedules. So maybe that's part of his angle, is let me throw out a crazy suggestion that actually forces the SEC to streamline with the rest of us. But I still think I think for the entirety of the sport, I don't know if I love it, but I also don't know what you do with bowl season. And I don't know what you do. I just think if you go that route, you have to change. There are other changes you have to make, particularly scheduling, systematizing non-conference, systematizing conference schedules. Like, I think you'd need a commissioner.
Well,
it needs a commissioner already, but you would desperately need one if you went to this model.
Yeah, I mean, you need a commissioner incredibly bad right now, because without a commissioner, you're continuing to get stuff like this. Which, let's be honest, we can try to point this in any way that, like, oh, this would be good for this, and here's a positive for this. The Big Ten's not thinking about that at all. And newsflash to SEC fans out there that are upset with the Big Ten right now: the SEC is not thinking about that either. The Big 12 is not thinking about that. The ACC is not thinking about that. All of these groups are trying to think about what gives us the most money. And right now, there is nobody combating that, trying to fight for what's best for the sport. So my next question to ask you here, Zach, was how likely do you think this is to happen? It's not if it's going to happen, it's when. Because right now, there is nobody fighting for the sport to actually stay what the sport is about and stay for what the sport is meant for. It's just a bunch of conference commissioners and presidents and athletic directors that are trying to get as much money as possible.
Yeah. Which I think we knew when the sport expanded to 12 that it eventually would expand. It's just a matter of time. And there's a part of me that's like, this could be fun. And then there's a part of me that's like, I really don't love it.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the last question here, and then we will end this segment of the episode and bring Jeff in for the second segment about our superlatives and stuff like that. Zach, if this were to happen, if we were to get a 24-28 team playoff, who would be some winners and who would be some losers in the Big Ten? Give me at least one name for each.
Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned a few. Like, I think your Iowas, your Wisconsins, your Indianas, your Illinois, like those mid-tier teams, especially if they're going to auto bids, right? If we're not talking about what a committee thinks, we're talking about where teams finish in your conference, then I think the teams that benefit the most are teams that maybe don't have the cachet, the program cachet when you say their name, but they can kind of earn their way in by a conference record.
And earn more respect for their name, right?
Yeah, right. So I think that they are the winners because, and we saw it, we've seen it a little bit with Indiana, although I think people are still skeptical about them. But when you start making waves and you make a playoff, all of a sudden you become a more attractive destination. We saw that in the transfer portal. We saw it in recruiting with Indiana. Well, if more and more teams can make the playoff, you become a more viable option for you to both develop and to attract high level talent to win a championship. So I think those schools certainly help. I think obviously the SEC and the Big Ten probably benefit more than the ACC and the Big 12 because I think a model like this, I know it says 7-7-5-5, but again, as certain conferences hold more money, they will probably finagle themselves to get more power, more influence, and more say. So I think the losers ultimately are the middle of the pack ACC and Big 12 teams.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with you there. If I'm thinking only Big Ten, my teams are, and Philip said it there, Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon. Those are the teams because the regular season truly will matter less for those teams, right?
Yeah,
win
true.
7 Big Ten games just like you do every single year, and you're going to be in the playoffs and have an opportunity to go do something. The season is basically going to become just a warm up for what everything is truly at the end. However, the winners in this situation would be teams like Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Wisconsin. All right, I know Wisconsin's not very good right now, but how many years would Wisconsin have benefited even from a 12-team playoff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2014, 15, 16, those years, or 20, I guess 11, 12, 13, like those kind of years. Wisconsin would have benefited from those because they would have gotten in and had the opportunity to do something. So I think that's really what you look at here more than anything else. You look at the top half of most of these conferences, the SEC, the Big Ten. The regular season won't matter as much for them, but it's these lower down teams that could have the opportunity to make the playoffs and create a name for themselves there that could honestly bring them up even more, because then they're not just winning bowl games that are meaningless. They're actually winning games in a playoff that's going to go to their record, and they're going to be paid attention nationally, and people are going to say, oh, wow, I didn't expect Indiana to beat Louisville, or oh, wow, I didn't expect Iowa to beat Tennessee, or something like that,
Yeah.
So, all right. Anything else on that before we move on?
Nope. No, I think we have thoroughly covered it. I don't think I was as much of a dream crusher as Philip wanted me to be.
No, you were good. You were good. You did a good job. All right. We are going to be moving on to the second part of the episode. So if you're listening on podcast, thank you for listening. We appreciate that. We are going to end the podcast episode here. If you're with us on YouTube, thank you for being here. Please do stick around for the second half of this episode. We are going to start that here in just a moment. I'll do the intro, and then we got Big Jeff coming in for the second half of the episode. Will be a good time. All right. Stick with us. Podcast listeners, thank you. See you tomorrow. Everybody else, we'll be right back. Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle, where we talk every single Big Ten team, challenging the national SEC bias, and, of course, having a few laughs along the way. I'm JR, joined today by Zack Guggenheim and also Big Jeff, who I'll bring on here in just a minute. On this episode, we will predict our Big Ten superlatives for this year, like sleepers, breakout players in the Big Ten, and so much more. If you like that, hit that like button, subscribe. We appreciate you doing that. We are here on YouTube live on Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday nights. Become a member, subscribe to our basketball channel as well, and follow us on Twitter, X, Twitter/X, Instagram, TikTok, all those good places at the Big Ten Huddle. Now, here's the guy who would never adjust his analytical power rankings 1 week before the season starts to show favor for the SEC like ESPN does, Zack Guggenheim.
It's wild how many people have tried to explain away why Clemson plummeted in FPI.
Yeah.
I just
Oh.
I'm gone. I'm not
go?
on the screen. There I am.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's got to be a flaw in the system if your analytics change from the beginning of preseason to the end, right? Yeah. Jeff, there's got to be something wrong, right?
I mean, that FPI is just a waste of time.
Thank you, Jeff.
It. Yeah.
You're more SP. You're more SP plus, right, Jeff?
Yeah, I do like SP plus because it's statistically based. He's tweaking the model. We can poke holes in it as you can do any statistical model, but I do like it actually.
Yeah. Yeah, FPI is just a garbage fire in my opinion. So
Really weird. And during the season, I could tell you, like some of the stuff it does with the individual games, you're like, what? Yeah.
yeah.
Don't go by that.
Yeah.
Go by FanDuel.
Max says kind of nuts. Both Indiana and Illinois aren't top 25 in FPI right now. I mean, FPI just incorporates so much recruiting rankings and stuff, which I would understand that years ago, but I think with the transfer portal and development and stuff like that, I just don't think transfer rankings or not transfer recruiting rankings matter as much. They still matter, don't get me wrong, but I don't think they matter as much as they used to, and I think that needs to be taken into consideration. But that's just me.
FYI, Sagarin, their preseason power ratings are out, and the top 3: Penn State, Ohio State, Oregon.
I've seen that. I've seen there are other ones. What's his name? I think Bud Davis on Twitter. He put his out there, and his like top tier 1 teams of college football are literally Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame's the 4th in Sagarin. Yeah. And what's interesting about Sagarin, again, not that it's the end all be all. You can poke, as Jeff said, you can poke holes in all of them. Penn State and Ohio State are a good 1.5 higher than the next team, which is Oregon. And I mean, they are Notre Dame, Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State are all. Notre Dame's about a full point ahead of Texas. And then like it's a pretty big gap, which is surprising to me.
Yeah. Philip says, now we have SJA, Sergeant Jeff's Analytics. Hey, we're going to get like Sergeant Jeff's Analytics on Thursdays during the season, right, Jeff? You want to tell people about your show on Thursdays during the year?
My focus is going to be on individual games, so I'm going to pick up to 5 games against the FanDuel spread and give reasons why I think one team or the other is going to cover the spread. So it'll be very specific to games to get us ready for the weekend. I think it'll be
and like you said, you've in the past you've done this a lot, where you've gone through and tried to predict what the spread would be, and then try to figure out what's the best thing and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, we don't do a ton of betting content on this show, but definitely, if you are somebody likes to wager on FanDuel and stuff like that, this will be a good show for you. Or if you just like hearing about that stuff, because I think it's interesting, and you might think it's interesting too, it'll be a good conversation to have. But we have some underrated games to get into first, so let's do that, gentlemen. The Big Ten is filled with big games this season, but what are the underrated games that need to also be considered? I have a few ideas. However, I want to hear from Jeff first. So Jeff, I don't want you to pick Ohio State, Penn State. I don't want you to pick, Penn State, Oregon, anything like that. What are some underrated games? We went through and saw a couple of them. We went game by game through our schedule prediction last episode or 2 episodes ago. What's an underrated game for you coming up this season in 2025?
So just the way I looked at it is that it would be a mid-tier team, and the outcome of a particular game would dictate whether they get to the 6 wins and make a bowl game. So I looked at all my 5 and 7 predicted teams, which were Wisconsin, UCLA, Michigan State, and Rutgers, and then looked at games that they lost, that I predicted they lost, that maybe they could win. And the winner actually turned out to be Wisconsin at Minnesota for me in the last week of the season. The week before that, Illinois comes in to Camp Randall, and that game you can't say it's underrated, because for Illinois it could mean make the playoffs or not, and for Wisconsin they would love to ruin Bielema's season with Illinois, right? And Illinois is a rival. But if they lose that game, I really think Wisconsin will go in that next week needing to beat Minnesota to get the 6 wins. That's important for Fickell. I don't think he's going to get fired even if he doesn't, but I think being in a bowl, you get more practice time, right? More practice reps. It's a better story for recruits. And I think that's a big game for Wisconsin to build momentum. And that's why I'm calling that an underrated game for me.
And
Zach?
more people need to know about the Axe Trophy. Like, it's the coolest trophy.
I mean, I definitely think it will be a game that people recognize in the Big Ten because of the implications of the rivalry and everything like that. However, you're right, Jeff. With all the talk this season about Wisconsin, is Luke Fickell going to be fired or not, stuff like that, Illinois is going to have the spice because it could be a possible playoff entry game or not. But the Minnesota-Wisconsin one, that's one that more Big Ten fans and people who pay attention to this conference will need to make sure they're on top of because it really could impact A, things with Luke Fickell, and B, just the direction of the program overall. And also Minnesota, too. You know, that could be a game that could elevate Minnesota to possibly 8-9 wins. And if they get there, that's a huge season for Minnesota.
Yeah, much better bowls could be at risk for them, too.
Yeah. Lots of good storylines there. That's a good one, Jeff.
Zach, what do you got?
So I went a little different. I was thinking about games that are a little under the radar but could be an upset for a team that maybe is a bigger team that could prop the other team either into playoff contention or into a better national spotlight. So I've got two. One is Oregon at Iowa in week 11. Like, Oregon's coming off a bye. I think people would expect Oregon to beat Iowa, but Iowa's also coming off a bye, and it's in Kinnick. And so if it's at night, especially, I could see where that could knock Oregon out of playoff contention, or it could propel Iowa to a much better season and maybe playoff consideration at the end. The other one, and Jeff, you have this, you picked this as an upset, Ohio State at Washington. The big game that week is Penn State, Oregon. But like I think it's going to be the 3:30 CBS game. Ohio State at Washington, I think, is an underrated game. A lot of people will have Ohio State at Illinois circled in that 4-game stretch. But that Washington game, I think, is going to be really tricky for the Buckeyes too. And so I think I have that circled as one of my underrated games.
Yeah, I think that's good stuff. The Oregon at Iowa one, I do think that's probably one that'll get a little bit more juice as it comes up, but it's not really one that's being seen as that right now. And it's also coming off that Penn State Ohio State game the week before it, and that's obviously the one that's going to get a lot of the recognition before that one. So good picks there, Zach. I'm going to go. So I thought about USC Michigan, as Max pointed out there. I feel like that's one that's going to get a lot of hype going into it with Michigan and USC. I think both of those teams could have good records by that time. 1, maybe 2 losses, but not, maybe both teams undefeated too. We'll see. But I think that's going to be one that's really interesting, especially with how things ended last year, right? Can USC avenge what happened with their defense, with Kalel Mullings kind of breaking off the big run there and then being able to get the win late in the game? That's going to be a game that means a lot for USC. So I think that one's a little bit too hyped up. And then Philip says here, Rutgers versus Minnesota. You're right. Kirk Shiraka. I mean, the storylines with the coaches, Athan Kalakmanis. That's a really good one.
Very good one
to think about there.
And bowl implications for Rutgers there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good thought. I think the one that not enough people are paying attention to right now, and it's because I think it's being overshadowed by that Indiana-Illinois game, is Indiana at Iowa, and then also Illinois USC. I think those two games there in week 5, they're going to be overshadowed because you have Ohio State at Washington, you have you have what's the other one? Oh no, Wisconsin, Michigan's the week later. I apologize, but I think those two games are going to get overshadowed by Ohio State, Washington, and I think those are going to be important ones too, especially for whichever team loses that game between Indiana and Illinois, because that's going to be a must-win game if you want to vie for the playoffs after that. And it's also going to be a must-win game for USC and for Iowa, because those are going to be, possibly their biggest test of the season so far. So really important games there.
Good stuff, JR. That's good.
Any other thoughts on underrated games before we move on, guys?
A lot of candidates, man.
There are.
Yep.
There are. All right, well, let's get to sleeper teams. All right, so we'll do sleeper teams, and then we can kind of do disappointing teams after that. But let's start with sleeper teams. Zach, we'll let you start here. Zach, who are some teams in the Big Ten, or maybe one or two teams in the Big Ten that you picked lower in your Big Ten predictions that you think have the opportunity to be higher? You didn't pick them to be higher, but you yourself could be sleeping on too much.
You asked me this pre-show, and I missed the part where you said teams that I picked to be lower. So I told you Washington, and I'm like, no, I picked Washington and USC to do really well this season. So forget that. I'm going to audible here. I will, because I picked, Max said Washington could be a sleeper. I agree, but I think they're going to do really well.
Yeah. Not a sleeper for us because we picked them to do well in a lot. Yeah.
So honestly, I don't have super high expectations for Minnesota, but PJ Fleck just wins. And I don't have Minnesota. I think I have them 7-5. I forget. I need to find
you do. 7-5.
7-5.
Yeah.
7-5. But I can see a world where they spring an upset or two with a young quarterback and they end up 9-3 and maybe bordering on say they get a big upset win. They don't have a lot of opportunities for upset wins, but like their schedule's manageable enough where they could go anywhere from 8-4 to 10-2. So I think I'll go with Minnesota as one of my underrated teams. The other one, and someone, Philip poked it at me, but there is a world where Iowa is in playoff contention.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just a world. They just have to be consistent. They have to be what they've been in years before. And if they're 10-2, they have a likely shot at it,
Yeah.
So, yeah, beat Indiana and beat 10-2, and, Iowa's going to be right there. But Steely Matt shared the stream. We appreciate you doing that. Steely Matt, they're on X. If anybody else is watching on X and you would like to repost the stream, we always appreciate if you would do that. Thank you, Steely Matt, for consistently doing that. All right, let's look at some teams here for me. So I have 3 teams that I feel like I was too low on that could possibly win 2, maybe 3 more games than I thought. So Rutgers and UCLA, I both had 5-7. I believe UCLA was 5-7 for me. If not 5-7, they might have been 4-8. I think those are 2 teams that could both be bowl eligible. I actually think this Rutgers team is a better team in a lot of cases than they were last season. I think losing Kyle Monangai is huge. However, Athan Kaliakmanis continues to improve. I think the offensive line, they lost Holland Pierce, but they can continue to improve that. DT Sheffield, I know I said that the Rutgers offense would be worse, but that could surprise me. Maybe Greg Schiano starts airing it out a little bit more. Maybe he starts relying on that more. Maybe Kirk Soraka, his second year with Athan Kaliakmanis at Rutgers, it starts to look a whole lot better. And I do like this defense as well that Rutgers has. So this could possibly be a more talented team than Rutgers had last year. It's just the hard part with them is that schedule, So do they catch a team or two, get a win, get some wins over them, and do they finish the season 7-5 and win their bowl game this year and go 8-5? It could happen. I could be too low on Rutgers. And then UCLA, too. I mean, the hype right now for Nico Iamaleava at UCLA fall camp is like some of the biggest hype you're going to find for a player. Talking about how he's worth like 2 or 3 games for them. I don't know if I buy it. I want to see it first, but I have to acknowledge Nico Iamaleava. He has the potential. He has, everything that you need to be a really good quarterback, and Tino Sunseri with him as well. Quasi Gilmer, if he can really turn into a breakout receiver this season, like I think he might be able to, that could be huge for them. And then if that defense gets right, and like we know, Deshaun Foster is going to get his guys to play hard, do well. And then USC. I picked USC to go 7-5, but that was probably like my least comfortable pick because I just think USC is going to get into tier 1 at some point. If it's not this season, it might be next season, might be the season after that. But I think Lincoln Riley still has it in him. I think they run that program really well with Chad Bowen, however you pronounce his name. And I think they're going to get up there at some point. So those are probably my 3. Jeff, sorry if I took yours.
No, I mean, I like that. My second was Michigan State. I have them 5-7. I said in my review last week, I think they're a year away. But with Aiden Childs, if he makes a leap, then I underestimated them. But I didn't select them. I selected USC, JR. I know you just mentioned them. I said on my podcast, I guess 2 times ago, to me, no, it was last week. To me, they're the biggest sleeper team as far as I think they have a potential to make the playoffs. So you kind of said, who's the next Indiana? No one is, because no one's going to go from 2-10 to making the playoffs. But a surprise team to make the playoffs, I wouldn't be that surprised if USC did it. And just, I have them 8-4. The over-under is only 7.5, though. But they're recruiting well, 5-year recruiting average of 23. Proven coach, like you said. I mean, I know people like to rag on him, but I mean, he did really well at Oklahoma. Just a great offensive mind, and he has a good defensive coordinator, right? So they blew 3 fourth quarter leads. Last year's team should have been more like 9-4, 8-5 at least, not 7-6. And then I just look at 2 high potential wins that I have as losses at Illinois week 5. USC flat out has more talent than Illinois, flat out. So I wouldn't be shocked if they went into Illinois and won, but I have that as a loss. And then Michigan at home, I have as a loss. But, I definitely see that's one that's 50-50 in my book. Young quarterback for Michigan, probably I'd pick USC if you had the gun to my head. So really, USC is the one for me, potential even to make the playoffs.
I like that. That.
That's good.
All right. Zach, we'll let you start this one off again. Disappointing teams. Who is a team that you had maybe winning 8 or more, maybe 9 or more games that you're like, listen, I picked them to win this many games, but I am not super confident in them. Zach, I'm thinking of one team that you picked to win 10 games, and if you don't say them, I'll say them for you afterward, but go ahead.
It wouldn't happen to be Nebraska, would it?
Yes, it is Nebraska.
Yeah. About that. I don't like it. Yeah, about that. I think it starts with Nebraska for sure. The schedule is manageable for them, but there's definitely, we've said that about Nebraska for how many years when they were in the Big Ten West. So for me, and I think we've all said this at some point, Nebraska just has to prove it. Dylan Raiola has to prove it. And for the past 9 years, they haven't proven it. So 10-2 with caution is my. I will say the other 2 that I'm thinking of, and I hate to say it, and I'm going to get ragged on in the comments, but it is Illinois and Indiana. Illinois, I think, returns a lot of production. I think there's a lot of good momentum. Obviously, I really trust Brett Bielema. But, Jeff, you made a really good point just now about them playing USC. USC has more talent. Now, is it proven or developed? We don't know. But, that's the issue that I see with Illinois is you've got to play at Indiana. You've got to play USC at home. You've got to play Ohio State. You got to play at Washington. You got to play at Duke. And you can't just rely on being bigger, faster, stronger. That's not how Illinois is going to win. Mm-hmm. And they won a lot of close games. And often what happens when you have a good season like that, you tend to return to the mean. So I'm a little concerned about Illinois. I want them to do well, and I think they can do well. But I think that's something to look out for. And I think Indiana, there's a big question mark about, can they hit on the transfer portal like they did a year ago and be the team they were? And again, they have a much tougher schedule this year. So I think Nebraska is certainly number 1, the team that is most likely going to disappoint me. But I would not be shocked if Illinois and Indiana are both disappointing as well.
All right. Okay. Zach got away from Indiana, and now he's not nearly on their high horse as much as he was.
That's not what happened. That's not what happened.
I'm just messing with you. We'll go
Uh-huh.
to Jeff here in just a second, but David wanted to give his 2 cents in there. David, we appreciate you watching and being here. He says, I think this could be a year where Ohio State and Oregon both miss the playoffs. I understand their talent level, but they both lost a lot of talent and experience as well. So, yeah, I think you could be in line for a 10-9 win season for Ohio State and Oregon, but I tend to believe both those two teams. Ohio State probably makes it with 9 wins. Oregon, they have a little bit of an easier schedule, so I'm not sure if they would. But I see what your sentiment there, David, and it is something I wanted to bring up because I was going to possibly bring up Ohio State and Oregon just with some of the question marks that other people kind of have about them outside right now. So good thought there, David. Jeff, I won't take yours this time unless I guess you had Ohio State or Oregon. Then
No,
just took it.
I'll hit on mine quick. I mean, Illinois was a candidate for me. I have them 9-3, but mostly because their schedule is really easy, and I think the coaching staff is outstanding. I just doubt their depth of talent. As simple as that. So, Nebraska, I have going 9-3 as well, Zach. So that's a game and a half over the FanDuel over under. But I actually believe they're going to do that. I think Varela is going to take the jump. Rule's a good coach. I don't worry about the past under previous regimes as much. But I'm going with Minnesota. I predicted them 8-4 in my podcast. They're over under a 6.5. So that's a game and a half over Vegas. Over under, that's a lot because Vegas really knows what they're doing. I had said I think that's the ceiling for them. So I was assuming with that record, Minnesota with a young first-year starting quarterback, and I know he's a redshirt freshman, right? Drake Lindsay. I'm just leery of any first-year starting quarterbacks. I do believe in PJ Fleck, though, and is why I think they'll hit the 8-4 and hit their ceiling. But I could be wrong, especially if Lindsay struggles. And then they for sure have a bunch of games that are really, at Cal early, right? That's second game, I believe. Young quarterback on the road. I know it's not a hornet's nest at Cal, but still, it's a road game. So, I think Minnesota, I worry a little bit about really based on the young quarterback.
That makes sense. I didn't write down Minnesota, but that was one that I was thinking we might have put down at some point because I think all of us did select them to at least win 7 games, maybe 8 games, all of us.
We did. You had them 8-4 as well.
Yeah. So, all right. So the disappointing teams that I have, I did have Oregon as a thought on there. I'm not going to say they're my disappointing team, but I did have them on there as a possible thought. Ohio State as well. They have that road game against Washington. You have Texas early on. What happens if Ohio State starts 2-2 with a new starting quarterback going to Washington? That could possibly be disappointing there. And then Oregon, Dante Moore and losing Evan Stewart and now Trey McNutt, stuff like that, just could play for some disappointing stuff there. I don't think either of them miss the playoffs, but I could see 9-10 wins. Maybe one of them misses the playoff. But I'm going to put in here, I didn't have Nebraska as high as you, Zack, so I can't say Nebraska. But the team I did have winning 9 games, they have a true freshman quarterback. They have some early games on the road. It might be Michigan for me. Is the team that I feel like the least confident on. And I'm not trying to pick on Michigan here because, like I just said, it's kind of the same thing with Minnesota, right? You got a young quarterback. I think Michigan starts the season a little bit tougher. I don't think Cal is nearly the environment that USC, Oklahoma, or Nebraska is. And Minnesota really only has that one to kind of start in the out-of-conference in Cal. So it depends for me how Michigan starts the season, right? If Michigan begins the season and they're 4-0, I got no worries. They're going to win at least 9 games if they start the season 4-0 in my book. But if they drop to, just like I said with Ohio State, so don't come at me, Michigan fans, because I just said the same thing about Ohio State. If they drop 2 of those and they go 2-2 or something like that, then I'm starting to have concerns, and then I'm starting to think to myself, okay, does this team have enough momentum to get themselves to that 9-3 type of situation, or are they going to rely on a surge at the end to get them to 8 wins with a bowl game or something like that? So those are my thoughts there. All right, let's get to our next one here, which is Coach of the Year. So looking at your predictions and everything else, who would be your coach of the year? Jeff, I'll let you start out with this one.
Good. Go with me because normally I'm not real negative, but this is the most annoying of all Big Ten awards. It so often does not reward excellence. Basically, they reward mediocrity. So really, you're going to look at the team that disappointed and they get the bounce back year. And it's so funny. Usually the team that has the bounce back year, the coach of the year, and then the next year they come back down to earth and it just looks so stupid. So I'm looking at like the 5-7 team. So candidates are Michigan State 5-7 last year, Nebraska 7-6 last year, Washington was 6-7 last year, UCLA was 5-7 last year. So those mid-range teams that could like win 3 more, that's what's going to rule the day. So I'm going with, based on my predictive records, Matt Rule. Matt Rule is going to be coach of the year. Take them from a 6-6 regular season to 9-3. Coach of the year, Matt Rule. Simple as that, but not excellence, right? They don't take the guys who are winning the national title. Urban Meyer just lit up the Big Ten. He never won a single coach of the year. It's just kind of a joke. But anyway, I'm usually not that negative. I'm sorry, but this award is just
there's so many things that go along with it, right? Oh, James Franklin could possibly win it this season, but you're really not going to see a tier 1 team coach win it unless there's just no surprising team out there. They might get like a co-win or something like that, but generally Penn State, Oregon, Ohio State, and Michigan, their head coach is not going to win this award. Now, Michigan could this year, coming off a 8-5 season last year and stuff, so Sherrone Moore could win it this time, but even like Kirk Sidnetti at Indiana after going 11-1 last year, I don't think he can win it. Right. Unless he goes 12-0, right? It's almost like you have to one up what you did last year for it. But in my book, if Kirk Sidnetti goes 10-2 this season, based on what everybody says about Indiana and how they're not going to repeat, I think he'd be a pretty good candidate for it. So, Zach, your coach of the year.
So I'm going to push back on all of what you just said because I have James Franklin.
Well, like I said, James Franklin could win it. Yeah.
If they go undefeated, I could see it.
He could at least be a co too.
But it's very rare. Right. I mean,
it's rare. Maybe I'm not pushing back. I don't know if there's going to be a team that really takes a massive leap, and I do think because Penn State hasn't won the Big Ten in 9 years. If James Franklin beats Ohio State or they go 11-1, I think they probably have to go undefeated. But I just think James Franklin is going to get it. I don't think there's going to be any team that pops so big that we don't expect that's going to be able to overtake him. So I've got James Franklin.
If Barry Odom wins 6 games, does he win?
No. Unless if he upsets somebody big.
Well, if he wins 6 games, I think so. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, hold on. Okay. So
with that schedule, they have a pretty tough schedule.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean,
yeah, okay. I concede.
It's possible.
Yeah. Yeah,
I just look at what everybody thinks about Purdue, right? Everybody treats Purdue like a MAC level program. I've called them that on this channel multiple times. It's more out of frustration than anything else because they were so good under Jeff Brom, and then Ryan Walters just all the way into the floor. But that's just more my frustration than anything else with Ryan Walters. I don't mean it at the Purdue program. It's more my
that was a very technical term. That was good.
I thought you might like that.
Yeah. I was going to say one other coach that could easily steal it from like a James Franklin is Deshaun Foster. Like if UCLA pops with Nico, as you were saying before, like if they go 7-5, 8-4,
But let's be honest. If your predictions play out and Nebraska is 10-2, Matt Rule's winning it, no doubt.
Yeah. No, you're probably right.
You might slap a co on there for like a James Franklin or somebody like that. But if Nebraska goes 10-2, there's no doubt they're giving it to Matt.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I would say James Franklin would only get it if there's not a typical big leap from a UCLA 5-7. That'd be the only way in my book that Franklin would get it.
How many wins does Matt Rule need to get Coach of the Year?
9.
Yeah.
I think the expectation this season is to win at least 8. I think if you get to 9 or more, unless James Franklin goes undefeated, unless Kirk Cinetti goes undefeated, I think you get 9 wins, you're winning at least the coach of the year.
Yeah.
So
I should probably do a big Jeff's analysis on coaches of the year and
it sounds like you're passionate about it, Jeff. So maybe,
no,
maybe
because
squeeze it in there.
It aggravates me, so I'd be angrier than, and I'm not normally mad. So
Big Jeff's angry insights. Let's look at one of those episodes. All right, so my coach of the year, if it plays out the way my predictions are, right now I have Illinois 11-2 and making the playoffs. If that happens, it's no doubt. I know they would have the same number of wins as last year, but this would be in the regular season and not include the bowl season. If Illinois goes 11-2 this season, they make the playoffs. It's no doubt Brett Bielema is the coach of the year.
He'll have my vote. It won't be worth anything, but he'd have my vote if that happens.
Have your vote though.
Yeah.
So, all right. Okay. So, very good. Very good. Let's move on to some player of the year and like breakout player of the year, stuff like that. So, let's do offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year, and then breakout player of the year. So, let's go offensive player of the year first. I'll go first with mine, and then we'll move over to Jeff. So, my offensive player of the year, I have 3 selections here. I have my most obvious one. I have my one that's I think this has a likelihood of happening, but I don't know if I see it happening. I want to see it happen first. And then my other one is I don't think this will happen, but it's kind of a wild card that it could possibly happen. My offensive player of the year, I have Jeremiah Smith. I think he's got the hype, everything else, unless he, completely falls off. I think he wins it. I think if Penn State has a really good season, goes 12-0, wins the Big Ten, I think he probably wins Offensive Player of the Year. And then my kind of wild cardy one, could possibly do it, but I don't know if they would actually give it to him or not. Would be Jada Mayava, USC quarterback. So, but I think he could have a good enough season, even if they only go 9-3 or something like that. I think he could have a good enough season. They would give it to him, or like a Dylan Raiola, somebody like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Jeff, who you got?
Yeah, I would just say that Jeremiah Smith might be obvious, but so many Ohio State players have won this award. We probably could check that out. It's really amazing, and probably not surprising to people how prolific they've been offensively. But I'm looking at, a little out of the box here. I did a podcast, May 22nd podcast on projecting all the Big Ten passers in their passer ratings. And number 1 was Drew Aller, but I don't think he's going to win it. So number 2, though, was Indiana quarterback Fernando Mendoza. I'm going with him as Offensive Player of the Year. I had projected 3,042 yards passing, 23 TDs, 8 INTs, 69% completion percent. And like I said, having the second best rating in the conference. It's not going to go to a running back. It's just too hard to happen. And typically a quarterback is winning these type of awards more and more, kind of like the Heisman, right? Yeah. It's becoming a quarterback award. So I'm going with Fernando Mendoza.
Good pick. Zach?
So I have Fernando Mendoza as my number 2. I have Jeremiah Smith as my number 3. My number 1 is actually a running back.
Zach is just not agreeing with any of us tonight.
No,
okay.
No. Well, but I agree in general that I think it's hard for a running back to win.
Not impossible, though. Not impossible.
Yeah, unless if you specifically design things. And I think Nicholas Singleton is a running back in an offense that could be utilized in a way where he is running, passing, and maybe even throwing. So I have Nicholas Singleton as the best player, the best offensive player on the best team in the Big Ten.
So my pushback on that would be just like last year with Travion Henderson and Judkins. Just split the stats being split between those two, and therefore, one of them not being the bell cow and the stats they need to win this award.
Yeah, and I thought about that, and I think, and I could be completely wrong on this. I wonder if Singleton becomes like the Tyler Warren this year, and maybe that's too much guesswork. But I just think Kotelnicki likes to design plays for his best players. And like Katrin Allen is a really good player. Like I don't want to take anything away from him. But I just there's another gear with Singleton. So but but I think you're right, Jeff. Like I think if they split carries too much, I think Mendoza and Smith are probably my 1 and 2. But
I think for me the difference for me with Singleton and Allen and Henderson and Judkins is that Singleton and Allen both have the opportunity to break the career rushing record for Penn State. And I think if you get that record, that gives you a little bit extra juice. And then the award not only is for the season, but it's also kind of like a career award as well, too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
And the Big Ten loves their career awards.
They do.
Legends and leaders, right?
yeah. Just go and put Nicholas Singleton in the legends and leaders thing. Yeah, that'd be great. Okay, let's do defensive player. Oh, where do we go? There it is. Defensive player of the year. Jeff, I'll let you start on this one. Who you got for this one?
So this one is the hardest award to predict because it can come from many different positions. But really, it needs to come up from a team that has lots of big games on big stages. I'm just keeping it simple. I'm going with the best defensive player that many think is in college football and the best NFL prospect in the Big Ten on the defensive side. Ohio State safety Caleb Downs. It also helps that he's going to return some punts, probably. I mean, I'm thinking he might. That could add to his value. So just Caleb Downs is my pick.
Ditto. I think you said it quite excellently, Jeff. I think it's Caleb Downs. I will give 2 dark horses, though. And they're not really dark horses. I think Mateo Uyunglele, if they just let him loose as a pass rusher.
Yep.
And then the other one who's a pass rusher, and this is like big time dark horse, Kenyatta Jackson. I know there's a lot, like there's Gabe Yakis, there's Mikel Kamara. There's a lot of hype for Kenyatta Jackson right now. And if you have a pass rusher out of Ohio State who gets double-digit sacks, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to ignore them.
I was going to say, Zach, if you went with him, why wasn't he your breakout player of the year? Maybe he is that as well then.
I was gonna say, that sounds like more of a breakout player of the year type of candidate than a defensive player of the year.
But a breakout player could win the defensive player of the year too.
It's true.
Yeah. I do have a different breakout player, but yeah.
Jake, it's no secret I do love Eric Gentry. That has been well documented on here before. Unfortunately, I just don't know if a linebacker, unless they have a Jay Higgins type season where they have just like over 100 tackles and all that stuff, I don't know if they're gonna. And that's kind of, I mean, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna make the Iowa fans mad. But that, like, I don't know if I see a linebacker winning the award, you know, unless there is like some kind of like career milestone that goes with it, or just like some outstanding tackle amount or something.
You're going to have to get some turnovers, like some interceptions among their stats.
But rest assured, I do love me some Eric Gentry. So let that be known. Okay. Defensive player of the year, I had Coy Parrish. If he has the same type of interception stuff, if he's playing both sides of the ball, I think he's going to get close to winning that award, if not winning it. Caleb Downs in there as well. I don't think Caleb Downs will really have the stats because he's not like that roaming free safety that's going to get you 6, 7, 8 interceptions. But I do think he's going to be recognized for very good play. And then the other ones are like your standard kind of edge rushers, you know, that one of these guys is just going to have a crazy amount of sacks this season, whether it's Gabe Yakis, Mikel Kamara, Mateo Uyunglele, Derek Moore, somebody at Ohio State like a Kenyatta Jackson. I'm probably missing somebody, and I'm going to hear about it from their fans in the chat. Deny Dennis Sutton, right? Like some kind of edge rusher that just completely goes off and gets a crazy amount of sacks would probably be the one that would win that somewhere in there. And sometimes it just depends on how good the coverage is behind them, because all these guys are going to get to the quarterback, but not all of them are going to have good enough coverage behind them to give them the opportunity to get there. So my safe pick here will be Coy Parrish, but there's a litany of edge rushers in this conference that if they have a good enough pass defense behind them, they're going to rack up 10, 11, 12, 13 sacks this season and get considered for it. So
Nice.
all right, Zach, we'll let you start with the breakout player of the year. Is it Kenyatta Jackson?
It's not, although he's definitely he would, if he does what I think he's going to do, he would definitely qualify.
Okay.
But the guy, and I think we've talked about him before. I think Damon Williams at Washington is going to be
Great pick. Yeah.
I think he is going to have a stellar season, and I think that's why many of us are high on Washington this year. Is I think he's going to be a true dual threat guy who has a lot of stats, maybe threatened for offensive player of the year. But I think everybody will know who Damon Williams is by the end of the season.
That's a great pick. Great pick. Jeff, who you got?
That's a great pick. There's good candidates, but this one was easy for me. Junior running back Justice Haynes from Michigan. Now, I'm a little biased. He is from Alpharetta, Georgia. That's where I live. And he actually started in high school at Blessed Trinity, which is in my son's, who plays football, region. So we're going to play Blessed Trinity, unfortunately, the second to last game of the season, and they're loaded with Division I talent. But then he transferred to Buford High School, which was, big national power. That's where Dylan Raiola went. I watched him in the Georgia playoffs. I mean, he is just a special back. Had a good year at Bama last year, about 450 yards rushing, 5.7 yards per carry. And he's just perfect for Michigan. They have a young quarterback in Underwood. Michigan wants to run. They're going to double down on running with given that Underwood's young, and they're going to roll out Underwood some and run him some as well. But I expect Haynes to go for 1,000 plus and really be a big viable candidate to win this breakout player of the year.
That's interesting you say that, Jeff, because my breakout player of the year, or one of them, is Jordan Marshall.
Yeah. I think Haynes is better. He's better.
I don't know which one is better. Marshall flashed in the game against Alabama. Haynes was a backup at Alabama, but he definitely flashed in some of the carries that he got there as well. So I think it's appropriate to say one of these two Michigan running backs has a very, very good chance of being the breakout player of the year. Damon Williams is a great choice. Dylan Raiola is another great option. Aiden Childs, like you talked about with your possible sleeper pick there, Jeff, about Michigan State. If this offense really lights things up with Michigan State this season, that could be a good possibility for the breakout player of the year if he fixes up those turnovers, and he has a really good wide receiver core as well.
He has a one.
If that offensive line gives him time, he could be the breakout player of the year as well. So I think one of the Michigan running backs, either Haynes or Marshall, Raiola, Williams. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody. Childs. I don't think Fernando Mendoza would get it. Fernando Mendoza's getting like first round type of thoughts right now and in grades. So I don't think he would be a candidate for breakout player of the year. But I think some people might think that because there are some people out there that just don't recognize how good Fernando Mendoza.
And I wonder if Raiola would fall in that bucket too, even though he didn't have a great year, but it's almost like he's kind of expected to be really better. And Dara, I do agree on Michigan, but this is dependent for Michigan on that line being much better than last year. If that offensive line is not significantly better, it doesn't matter how good these guys are. They're not going to have.
We talked about it last Tuesday. Sherrone Moore came out and said that the offensive line for Michigan is pushing the defensive line more. And as we know, the defensive line is one of the biggest strengths for this Michigan team. So if the offensive line is holding their own against that defensive line for Michigan, then that seems to bode good news for the Michigan fans and their team. But as with most things, and I don't just say that about Michigan, I say it about pretty much every team. We'll see when they start playing the games. That's kind of
for sure
how it goes.
We'll find out how good that Michigan offensive line is against Oklahoma. I'll tell you that.
That's true. Yeah, Oklahoma has a very good defensive line. So
yeah, that's true. One more potential breakout player that I'll throw out there: Hudson Clement out of Illinois. They need someone to step up at receiver with losing Zachary Franklin and Pat Bryant. I there is a lot of excitement. If you heard Luke Altmaier at media days, he talked about the loss of Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin and how that would hurt. But then he got a big grin about the talent they have in that receiver room. So we talked about it a little bit last show. Just that there is a lot of rotation, but I think Hudson Clement's going to be one of those guys that really does break out this season.
I think Hudson Clement is going to rack up the yards and be a very good option for him. I'm interested to see who that guy is that is kind of like the star wide receiver, right? Who is the guy that is the third down option? They consistently go to him, get the ball out to him. I don't know if he'll necessarily have the yards and stuff like that of a Hudson Clement, but I think he'll kind of get the recognition of being like that reliable guy. Mm-hmm. I was hesitant to pick an Illinois wide receiver just because there's so many. It sounds like there's so many good ones in there, but we just don't know which one will be the star guy, right? It's kind of an interesting situation, but good pick. I've been high on the Hudson Clement train as well. So, all right. I think John says, is Moneyline Mateer cleared to play versus Michigan? Yeah, as far as we know, Moneyline Mateer.
What a great.
That is such a great nickname. We'll have to keep calling him that. As far as I know, he is.
So. I was gonna say FanDuel loves that, right? Yeah,
they do.
It's like writes their publicity for them.
Well, what is the line on that Michigan Oklahoma game again? Isn't it like 2.5? I think Oklahoma is favored. I'm trying to find it really fast.
I don't know. I feel like we need to make a graphic of Moneyline Mateer now.
Yeah. Well, we already have our Paul Feinbaum graphic. So. Yeah, Oklahoma is favored by 2.5. Unranked Oklahoma is favored by 2.5 over Michigan. So, yeah. So kind of wild, but Josh Pate had Oklahoma in his top 10 of his Pate poll or whatever it's called.
Vegas doesn't care about who the AP poll is. I mean,
yeah.
Well, true. Oklahoma is ranked in the AP poll. Oklahoma's 18th in the AP poll.
Oklahoma is? I thought they weren't ranked in the AP. Or was it the coaches poll?
The coaches poll, they're not ranked.
That's right. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry. Got those mixed up. So.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff. Gentlemen, any other thoughts or anything before we end it here?
2 weeks away,
close,
guys.
Baby. Yeah. Getting
2
close.
weeks away.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Just my son's team played. He's still out with the injury, but we had a little lightning delay, so it started an hour and a half later on Friday night. But we got down 20-7. We had 3 turnovers. They had 0, so that's the reason. Then we got a couple turnovers. We scored to go up 21-20, got the ball back with 5.5 minutes left, and ran the clock out. Kind of like it was a little like Ohio State versus Penn State, one of those deals, and it was pretty sweet.
That's beautiful.
A lot of fans. I mean, we had more fans there for this road game than they had, so it was pretty cool. So we're off to a 1-0 start.
There we go. Love it. Jeff, you'll have to let us know what Big Ten team are they most like this season.
I'll have to think about that because we're an underdog type team, and we, like I mentioned, Blessed Trinity. They've got a defensive end who's a 5-star. Some have him as like. One recruiting service had him the 2nd-rated player in the country. Another, his last name's Jacobs, his son, and his dad played at Georgia. He's the 11th rated composite, but he's only a junior this year. So we could play him for the next 2 years, which will be a lot of fun. Yeah. Like he's a game record. He's already 6'3", 240, in high school as a junior. It's a nightmare.
Crazy.
We have nobody who can block him.
That's Georgia football for you. There's one guy in there that just
goes crazy.
Goes crazy. All right. Thank you everybody for being here in the chat. We had a wonderful chat tonight. Very active. Appreciate all of you sharing your thoughts, breakout players, offensive player of the year, stuff like that, coach of the year, all those things. We appreciate you being here. And Zach and I will be back on Tuesday night, and then Jeff and I will be here on Thursday night as well. So catch us then. Probably I don't know what we're going to do Tuesday night yet, and then Jeff will have do you know what you're doing Thursday night yet,
I don't know yet. I don't know. I have several good ideas, but it will be good no matter what.
All right. Well, if we know Tuesday night, we'll let you know. But it should be a good time. So thank you everybody for listening. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.